There's one rule in business that I've always tried to live by, and that's don't mess with someone's paycheck. Back around 2015 to 2017, Facebook was flooded with these hyper-specific t-shirt ads. I think you probably remember them. Shirts that said things like, "I'm a left-handed welder born in October who loves fishing and hates Mondays." At the time, I owned a small design agency that created those kinds of graphics for people running those stores. While the example that I picked might not have been the greatest verbatim, things just like that sold like crazy back then. People running said stores usually weren't designers themselves. They hired agencies like mine to create the artwork, then uploaded it to print-on-demand sites like Teespring, and made money every time a shirt sold. For us, business was good. I had a couple of designers working directly for me, plus a huge network of freelancers that I'd hired before or was planning to hire in the future. One of my clients was absolutely killing it at this time. The guy was selling thousands of shirts every month, so when he approached my agency for new designs, I was excited to work with him. Unfortunately, I was young, dumb, and I made a rather silly mistake. Instead of getting paid up front like I normally did, I agreed to deliver the work first and let him pay me afterwards. About $1,000 worth of designs later, and said client disappeared on me. Crickets. I was furious, but after a couple of days, I accepted that I'd probably never see that money. It was an expensive lesson to learn, but business was busy enough that I decided to just cut my losses and move on. But then, this genius reached out to me again. This time it came a few days later. I got an email asking if I was interested in doing more work for this guy. This was a message that he sent out to dozens of creators, and apparently he'd forgotten that he'd just scammed me. But even better, the CC'd list that I was included on had several other designers that I was familiar with that he was trying to recruit. And that's when I realized something. Scammers aren't always brilliant. They are opportunists. Sometimes they're confident enough that they stop paying attention to clear mistakes. It was obvious that this guy wasn't paying attention at all. So, like I said, I recognized almost every designer copied on that email. Most of them were already in my freelancer network. And I remembered something else. I still had access to this client's shared Dropbox folder, so I just happened to take a look. Sure enough, I could see the names of all the designers that he'd just hired. From then, I waited about a week, just long enough for the new designers to get settled. Then I reached out to each one of them individually and offered some better paying work through my agency. Every single one of them accepted, and within days, this client had lost his entire newly acquired design team. Now he was in trouble. His business depended on constantly producing new shirt designs, and suddenly he had nobody there creating them. So guess who he went crawling back to? Me. This time, I wasn't interested in just recovering my $1,000 of lost labor. If I was going back, I was going to protect myself. I charged him the money that he owed me up front and added something extra to our agreement. I negotiated a 10% commission on any shirt that sold more than 1,000 units. On paper, it could look like a performance bonus, but in reality, that gave me something much more valuable. It let me identify exactly which designs of his were making serious money. Now, here's something a lot of people don't know about that era of print on demand. A lot of sellers cut corners. Instead of paying artists to create original graphics, they'd grab copyrighted vector artwork from the internet and then proceed to use it without permission. Technically, that artwork belonged to someone else. This client absolutely encouraged that exact kind of shortcut. So whenever I was asked to use one of those copyrighted elements, I'd quietly upload the completed design to my own dormant Teespring account first. I never promoted those listings. I never tried to sell the shirts. I simply created a dated record showing the design existed before I delivered it to him. Then I'd send him the files and let him launch his campaign. Well, over the next few months, my commission payments told me exactly which shirts were becoming his biggest sellers. Once I knew which designs had generated big money, I contacted the original artists whose copyrighted work had been used. I explained what had happened, showed them the campaigns, and pointed them toward the evidence they needed to file copyright complaints with Teespring. Those artists then went on to file claims. Not me, though. Teespring investigated, confirmed the infringement, removed the campaigns, and returned the profits from those designs to the rightful copyright owners. A few of those artists reached back out afterwards. They thanked me for helping them recover work that they'd never even realized had been stolen from them. And between all of them, they sent me about $10,000 as a thank you. Not bad for a guy who originally just wanted the $1,000 that he was entitled to for the work that he had done. But I wasn't finished there. Once everything was settled, I made sure other designers knew exactly who they were dealing with. I posted his information in industry groups, freelancer communities, forums, and this one website known as Ripoff Report. I didn't exaggerate anything, I didn't make anything up, but I told the truth about what had happened. If he wanted to keep burning designers, he'd have to work a whole lot harder to find new ones. Last I heard, even back then, he developed quite a reputation. Turns out word travels fast when you stop paying the people who make your business possible. And to be frank, this guy brought every bit of this attention onto himself. If he'd have just paid my original fee, what he owed me, none of this would have happened. But he got greedy, then careless, and in the end it cost him far more than he ever stole from me. It feels to me like the little invoice that I created, the one that it would have taken less than a single day's profits to just pay off, somehow morphed into the most expensive business lesson this scammer ever got. This is the story of how a friend of mine nuked a timeshare scam a few years back and then proceeded to take them to the cleaners. There's a lot to unpack there, so I'll just jump right in. So, background. A friend of mine is a big guy, maybe 6'3", 6'4", 250 pounds, and a no-nonsense military non-commissioned officer. He likes his booze and likes to have a good time when he's off the clock. We'll call him JB. One day he got one of those win a free week-long cruise, all expenses paid phone calls. He decides to look into it because why the hell not? Calls the number back and gets a lady on the other end who gives him the rundown of how the cruise thing works. It sounds far too good to be true. So he asks her, is there some sort of timeshare bullshit or any other strings attached to this? She assured him that no, there's not. He goes for it, signs up for a cruise a few months later during a block of leave. Okay, now here's where we really get rolling. In order to claim the cruise, he and his wife had to show up a day early to a hotel near the port where the cruise was departing from. The room is paid for already as a part of the cruise package. They show up the day before, as scheduled, and check in with the front desk. The concierge asks if they'd like to upgrade to the VIP package for $20, which includes free drinks at the hotel bar. Well, yeah, he does. He takes the upgrade and heads straight to the bar. JB is a social drinker, and when he gets liquored up, he starts socializing with other bar patrons. He finds out that they are also there for the cruise, and that there's some mandatory presentation the next morning that everyone has to go to. I think at this point, that's when JB starts to smell the rat. This sounds an awful lot like a timeshare scam. Well, he's having none of it. And being good and drunk, he rallies all the cruise goers around him, about 30 people total. He stands up on the table and delivers a William Wallace-style speech about how they don't have to deal with these timeshare scam artists. Within minutes, he's whipped the crowd into a frenzy and convinced everyone not to buy into whatever the presentation is selling. Sure enough, the next morning, everyone shows up to the presentation to claim their cruise. They're told the tickets will be given to them at the conclusion of the presentation. JB is drunk again because, well, free booze, and he's on leave. JB starts to go back into Braveheart mode, getting real loud about how it's a scam, and how he was told explicitly that there is no timeshare bullshit attached to the cruise. Well, the timeshare people instantly recognize JB as bad for business, so they usher him away from everyone else into a side room and try to talk sense into him. From this point on, the acronym TS will stand for Timeshare Scammer. TS. Sir, this is a mandatory presentation. We can't give you a ticket for the cruise unless you go to this. JB. Bullshit. Your representative specifically said there was no timeshare involved in this cruise. TS. Sir, we have all our calls recorded, and it was very clearly outlined that you'd need to listen to this presentation. JB. Good. I'm glad you have a recording. You pull up my recording and you show me exactly where your representative said that I had to stay for a timeshare presentation. At this point, a big beefy security looking dude, not with the hotel, clearly a part of the timeshare company, tries to intervene because JB is getting louder and louder and more angry. Security walks over towards JB, puts his hand on his shoulder, and before he can even get started in his spiel, JB responds with, "Back up, motherfucker, before I rip your head off, crawl down your neck, and out of your asshole." I know JB has a way with words. At this point, big beefy security guard meekly turns tail and all but runs out of the room. Now it's very clear that they can't let JB into the presentation or he'll ruin everything they have planned, so the director of the program pulls JB into his office. Basically tells JB that they listened to his call and he's right. The lady had said there was no timeshare involved. The director admits that they aren't able to print his ticket until 12:30 p.m., the time the presentation was scheduled to end, because the company locks them in order to force people to go to the presentations. He says, "If you come back at 12:30, I'll have your tickets and I will upgrade you to premium for free if you just don't go anywhere near our presentation." Too easy. JB does exactly that and then heads to the boat. Premium meant like the best cabin on the ship with, again, free booze and all sorts of awesome upgrades. I'm not sure what that would cost if you paid for it yourself, but it's a pretty penny. Turns out, everyone else who had to sit through the timeshare presentation almost ended up missing the boat because it went on so long. Not a single person bought a timeshare, and the presenters spent hours trying to convince them to. So eventually, they had to give up and handed everyone their tickets in defeat. In total, they made 0 in sales, but likely lost 3 to 5K for upgrading JB to keep him away from ruining something that they could ruin on their own. This one is fresh and it's still unfolding, but it's already hit an explosive level. Some details I've left intentionally vague. For context, I'm a woman in my 30s with a reasonably good corporate type job in a field with lots of room for growth, and I'm recently back into the dating scene after a decade off the market. I see myself as kind of a would-be a 10 if she lost about 30 pounds looking girl. Beautiful face if a bit chubby, but I've never had issues getting a date. I'm not well off, but I'm stable and have a bit of spending money. I live in a large multicultural city, and I've taken great pleasure in dating people from just about any and every background. I was actually hoping for a little bit more of that type of magic. Also, edit to add, for what it's worth, all the comments about my looks beyond the not having trouble finding a date were meant as jokes. I don't have that high of an opinion of myself, but I did want to highlight that the person the story involves probably could have tried to pick a better victim. Anyway, so what happened was, a few weeks back, I met a very charming man from a Latin American country, only a couple years younger than I am. Seemed sweet, cuddly, intelligent, family-oriented, emotionally available, and educated in a good profession back home in his country. We also had a lot in common. Chemistry seemed amazing both inside and outside the bedroom. He was honest that he was in my country on a tourist visa, but he was hoping to stay. I made it clear from day one that I wouldn't be able to help him with that, but we could have a fun summer fling while he was here. If he managed to stay or come back, then I'd be open to considering a real relationship. But then the other shoe dropped. A couple weeks and 4 dates in, during a text conversation about my work, he plain out asked me to be his sugar mama. I initially laughed and assumed that it was a joke, but he kept pushing and clearly said that it wasn't. Of course, feeling insulted by this, I went off on him. He maintained it as a serious ask until I apparently hit a nerve with my complaints about how embarrassed he should be to ask me that. Then he got angry and insulted me for thinking that he was serious about it, but no apology for being hurtful to me though. Obviously, what I did next was take screenshots and cry about this to my closest friends. I was hurt that I was fooled into thinking that this guy actually liked me, that he thought that I needed to pay for a man. My friends actually started the fuse on what happened next. One of my friends started snooping more into his online presence, and together we found no less than 6 different Instagram accounts that were him, using different variations of his name and different photos of himself, all uploaded in batches. On Facebook, a similar pattern. If that isn't scammy and suspicious looking. He'd been foolish enough on one of his profiles though to follow and tag the employer that he was working for, illegally, while on his tourist visa in my country. So I contacted another close friend in local law enforcement, an agency that works with immigration. She looked up his file and I got to learn that he had a wife and daughter back at home. That's what caused me to release the hounds. The friend who helped me investigate online made several group chats on multiple platforms with all of his family that she could locate, both immediate and extended, along with his friends. She released all the screenshots as well as a rant about how shameful it was. As each person started blocking her one by one, she only added more people to the groups. I found his sister's phone number. She sent her messages to the sister as well. Everyone he knows, including his wife, know that he's unfaithful and trying to take advantage of women. Well, 30 minutes after the online bombardment started, I get a rude message from him about how I should be smart enough to know that he was joking and he doesn't need to sell himself. I didn't reply. But my next step, online immigration reporting form with all the info that we had found out. Work info, employer name and address, his home address, full name, DOB, photos, screenshots admitting to working. Now usually these reports take months to be reviewed, if at all, but I gave the file number to my law enforcement friend. 2 days later, law enforcement officers visited him at home. They found him with a phone number that was issued to a local resident. All his roommates all had numbers issued to the same person, which happened to be a direct link to the employer. He received a caution for trying to scam me, as well as a no contact order and a flag on his immigration file that, based on his country of origin, will likely mean that he can never return to my country, as well as a strict warning to not work without authorization. His roommates also received the same warnings. His employer received a visit next. They found significant proof that he'd been employing them illegally, as well as multiple other people. Their investigation is still ongoing, but so far they are likely to receive tens of thousands in fines or possible jail time. The guy that tried to get me isn't getting deported because the government would have to pay for it, and these types of proceedings typically take longer than his remaining visa time. But he's now upgraded from a flagged file to a multi-year ban on re-entry. Although if he bothers me again, he will be deported. Hope he enjoys going back to his angry wife and the ridicule from just about everyone he knows. See you again, never. Years ago, I was quite involved in an active online community of analog audio hobbyists. People would occasionally put hardware and music up for sale on the message board that we used. I'd been looking for a specific piece of hardware for several years, to no avail. It was extremely rare and had never been sold in the US, so any examples would have been imported from Japan. Well, one of these machines popped up for sale from someone in the community, and I jumped right on it. The guy offering it wasn't new to the forum, but he wasn't terribly active. Somehow, he'd obtained pics that weren't on the internet and were not easily searchable. He also showed a Japanese bill of sale photo along with them, but I believe this to be a fake now. In hindsight, he may have actually seen one for sale and then stolen the images from that, but that's all I could really figure. Regardless, it all seemed legitimate enough to induce me to go through with the transaction. So PayPal sent, and he says that he'll ship the unit in about a week. But that's when the excuses begin. It went from he's been busy to out of town to his assistant shipped it, but didn't send the tracking number, to finally providing a fake tracking number. After all of this, the guy just quit responding to calls and emails. Turns out the number he'd given me was a forwarding service that he had subsequently disconnected. He also disappeared from the forum. He had, however, used his real name and a real PayPal account. I filed a claim with PayPal, and of course they denied the claim on some technicality. I'm sure he was actually counting on this occurring. So this is where the revenge begins, with an unintended bonus. All I wanted to do was make sure that the guy knew that I'd find him and I would get to him. I'd called the police and reported the matters, but it seemed to me that they couldn't have given less of a damn. I decided to find him myself, and I found an old wedding announcement that had been posted on the internet. I searched his wife's name and found mention of her being out on leave to give birth to their first child on her work website. Bingo. I had a small gift sent to her workplace with my name on it. Then I called her work to say that I'm an old friend and I didn't have her contact info, but I wanted to congratulate her on the new child and that I'd come see them soon. I had visions of his wife saying how nice it was that someone sent a gift to her work, before then asking who I was. This apparently spooked the guy because a cashier's check showed up at my house for the full amount. Now, what he hadn't counted on, and I didn't tell him, was that I'd filed a chargeback with American Express after PayPal denied the claim. My conundrum was actually this. The Amex investigation was ongoing, and I had no idea if they'd overturn the chargeback or not. I also had no idea if the cashier's check was legit. I've actually heard of counterfeit checks being sent up to 45 days later. So I truly didn't intend to profit off this, but I did. The Amex chargeback was resolved in my favor, which PayPal clawed back from his account. Shortly after that check was proven good. The kicker to all of this is that the guy had the gall to email and threaten to try to have me charged with fraud for the chargeback after he'd already sent the check. I simply responded with, "Hey, great to finally hear from you. Glad you're doing well. How's the baby? Look, I'm sure there's just been a mix-up, and I'll be happy to pay for everything, just as soon as I get the machine. I'm sure you understand why I want to receive it before I pay at this point. Of course, if you do want to call the police, you're welcome to explain to them how you attempted to defraud me by selling something you never possessed in the first place. It's your call." Never heard another word from the guy. I just hope his kid didn't have to go without diapers.